Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be working again with the Ender 3 Pro. And one thing I wanted to change on this printer as soon as I got it out of the box and started taking a look at it is the placement of the power supply. I don't like the power supply mounted in the back like this. To me, it's not as neat and tidy as it could be. So today's project is going to be to relocate the power supply to a similar location like the Ender 3 V2, which puts the power supply underneath the machine. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's start by taking some measurements. So I'll be doing that. And if you guys are new to the channel, consider subscribing, turn on your notification bell, and leave me some comments. I love reading the comments and do my best to respond as soon as I see them. All right, guys, so let's get started. I'm going to remove the power supply. And before you do it, make sure that it's unplugged and the machine is off. But to unbolt it, it's just two screws from the front. You got this one and this one here. And the power supply comes right off. All right, once the power supply is off, we just have to unplug it from the cables. And then we got to take the power supply out of its housing. So it looks like it's just held on here with these two screws. And once you got it like this, just flip up this little cover here and unscrew these three cables. And make sure that you write down the color order in which they're on these terminals. So you got your hot wire, your neutral, and then your shield. And then everything is labeled here. So you got 24 volt negative on this side, 24 volt positive on this side. I'm just going to unscrew these. And what I want to do is I want to place the power supply under here somehow. So the Ender 3 V2 has this metal box that fits in this space and is held in underneath by a couple of screws. So my idea here is to try to recreate that enclosure. That way we can relocate this power supply. All right, so let's take some measurements here and then jump on the OnShape and try to create a version for the Ender 3 Pro. All right, so what I need to do next is I'm going to unbolt this plug and switch from here. I'm not going to have the space to use these fastening points anymore because the measurements of the housing we're going to try to make don't allow for this large piece of plastic here. So I'm going to unscrew it from here and I'm going to try to trim it down and follow this outside edge as closely as possible. So after a few prototypes, this one being too thin, this one not having the screws in the right position, this one having the opening too large. The right thickness for something like this is 2 millimeters. So if you guys are thinking about following along and recreating it like I did, make it 2 millimeters. That way it's robust enough that it will hold the parts firmly. All right, so these are the parts that we printed. So this is going to be the bottom cover that covers the cables. This is the housing for the power switch, and it covers the terminals on the power supply. These are the two guides for the extrusions. So this is how we're going to hold this thing in. Also, I have a grommet here. So this is about a 22 or 24 millimeter grommet. And finally, the case for the power supply. So let's go ahead and put this thing together. We're going to need to modify some screws. So what we're going to need is some tapered screws like this. And this particular one is, so it's 3.5 millimeters by an overall length of 10 millimeters. So 3.5 by 10 millimeters. But some of these parts are not that long, so we're gonna have to grind the screws down a bit. So I already did this here, and I used the same bench grinder that I used to trim up that switch. So we're gonna need 6 of these done like the same way. And let me see how long this is. I think this is, so we reduced it from 10 to 7.5. We're also going to need 2 more of those screws trimmed down even more. And these are 6.3 millimeters long. We're also going to need some smaller tapered screws. And these are, I believe it's 3 millimeters in diameter. Yeah, so these are 3 millimeters in diameter by 10.5 millimeters long. We're also going to need screws that fit in the power supply. So these are a little bit longer because we got a little bit more plastic on one side. 4 millimeters in diameter, so 8 millimeters worth of thread. All right, so to assemble it, we're going to need to start with the power strip cover, along with the plug holder. So and this just goes one on top of the other, and this side has threads here, so it's got places to screw the screw into, and then the cover has the 2 countersunk holes. So I'm just going to put these together. And you need the shorter of these 3.5 millimeter screws here. All right, next thing we're going to install is going to be these side rails. So just get your side rails. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Once you got both those on there, get your power supply, and we're going to put it with the terminals facing this plug side. Now when you flip it over, you should have the holes there. So on these two, the ones closest to furthest away from the plug side, they get the shorter M4 by 6mm screws, and leave them loose so that we can make adjustments to the position of the power supply before finally tightening it. So now what you want to do here is there's gonna be a gap here because of this screw on this side. So you want to make sure that the same gap that's present here is on this side as well. So I'm just gonna hold this side down with my thumb and then tighten the screws on the other side. That way all the spacing is even. And that's it. So that looks good right there. All right, so this side on the Ender 3 V2, in one of my previous videos, I had cut out a hole in the metal plate. So this one, since I 3D printed, I designed the hole in here. And this is what you use this grommet for. So I'll leave a link in the video description to where you can get these grommets. But to put the grommet in, just squeeze it down, put it inside of its place here. And you may have to play with it a little bit because it's you gotta get both sides of it in. There it is, perfect. And the reason we did this is we're gonna run the wires from the main board through this channel, make whatever connections need to be here, and then the ones that go out to the thermistor, the bed, and the hot end are gonna come up and out this hole. So we'll have good wire management, nothing's gonna be in the way, and it'll be elevated off the floor. All right, so let's test fit it under the machine, and then we'll start working on the wiring. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to unplug the Y stepper switch and the stepper motor. I'm going to pull the bed back, and I'm going to put the wires underneath the leg to get them out of the way. That way we can work with the power supply. So you want the wires all the way over to the side like this. Pull off these extrusion caps. And then we're gonna slide the power supply in like this. So it goes into these V rails. Let me zoom in and show you. So if you look carefully here, these side rails, they fit into these channels here on the aluminum extrusions. So if I got it right, should slide in. And there you go right there. All right, so that's it. We can put our aluminum extrusion caps back on. All right, now I'm going to get something to prop the machine up so we can work on the wiring. Now to get all these cables through this this channel, we're going to have to unplug them from the motherboard. It looks really tight there. So what I'm going to do with the Z stepper wires, I'm going to I'm gonna run it another way. If you guys have downloaded the my Raspberry Pi case along with the motherboard housing, it'll have this slot designed into it. That way you guys can use it to run cables through. Another cable that's going to go through there is going to be the Y limit switch and the Y stepper motor. And the reason I'm doing this is to try to lessen the amount of cables that have to go through this area, because it's going to be a tight fit. All right, so for the Y limit switch, there's a second slot that I put into this case that I just forgot about. So it goes down here. So this thing would go in through this hole. All right, now we just got to deal with these cables here. So I'm gonna start by unplugging these stepper cables, and we'll start running them through the opening here on the power supply. All right, so I'm going to start with all the wires that have the plugs on them, because they're the ones that are going to need the most room to get through. So this one is the hot end group of wires. And lastly, it's going to be the heated bed wires. And the good thing is that the power supply has a gap underneath it, so you can fold some of these cables underneath to get them into this area here. So I'm going to start with the ones on the very bottom, which is the heated bed, followed by the hot end cables. So this is going to go under the power supply. And you got to give yourself enough slack that the wires are going to reach the places where they got to connect. It looks like I just need a little bit more. Actually, it looks like I may have to lengthen these cables. So the bed cables are going to need to be lengthened a little bit. So I'm going to just leave them hanging out over here in the corner, and then I'll lengthen them and connect them all. The extruder cables are next. And probably what would be a good idea is to raise the gantry all the way up. That way we can be sure that we got enough slack on the cables. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just turning the lead screw until the gantry is all the way in the top position. And it looks like these are going to make it without having to mess with them. Let's get these guys in first. And then lastly, the stepper motor wires. So it looks like I got just barely enough length to do this. Excellent switch. Yeah, the great thing is everything reaches pretty much except for these two right here, but we'll take care of that in a minute. And you gotta be careful, make sure that you get these wires seated right, because it's easy to miss the place where they need to go. And the hot end thermistor, it's another one that's a little bit tight. I think we can make it reach. Barely reaches. All right, I just got to lengthen this. So I'm going to go ahead and get some appropriate wire and we'll solder it up. Since the power supply is not going to be outside of the case anymore, I don't need this section of wire. So the plan is to just run this directly to the power supply, and then I'm going to use this section of wire for the heated bed. So I'm going to lengthen the heated bed with this cable. I'm just going to cut these, or maybe right here. So lengthen them by maybe 5 inches maybe. And then I'm going to strip out these ends and solder them. Okay, so for the thermistor cable, I'm just going to use a JST connector. And it doesn't have to be very long, maybe 5 inches maybe. And since we're putting JST connectors on these, you just have to just strip just the slightest little bit, maybe about 2 millimeters. Now for me, I find it easiest to load the JST connector using a set of tweezers. So just get your tweezer, your JST crimper, and you're going to line it up in there. Click it once, make sure that there's a little gap. So if you see the connector, let me zoom in here so you guys can see that. You got to make sure that you have that little gap between the end of the connector and the tool. Otherwise, when you crimp down, you'll crush it. And then just put your wire in through this side. So you can put your wire in through this side like this. And as soon as it goes in, you can and let's check and make sure it grabbed the wire. Yeah, it did. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna do the same side with this, same thing with this one. And I'm gonna load it on the tweezer, get it in the gun, click it once, and then take my wire, carefully feed it in there, and crimp. And let's see, yeah, that one looks like it grabbed the wire good. This one I'm a little bit worried about because it looks like it might have grabbed some insulation, but anyway, we'll test it and see. And on these things, it's just a straight through connector, so it doesn't matter really which one goes where. I'm just going to twist these around. And you want to push them in until they lock. Just like that. There you go. Okay, so now we got this little jumper here. Extender. That we can use to plug our thermistor back in. Alright, so let's go ahead and put this back on. And then this is going to go wired straight, so I'm going to go ahead and start moving this wire to this position. And I think I'm going to put, I'm going to cut this end off. I think I'm going to put a piece of loom like this on here. That's interesting, this wire is cut here. So now I'm just going to use a set of crimpers and a couple of connectors. So these are just terminal connectors. And if you look carefully at these terminal connectors, they'll have a slit on them. Let me show you the slit. It's kind of hard to tell, but if you look right here at the very top, there's a slit here. So this slit, I used to work in the car stereo industry for many years, and how you line this up is you got a tool that looks like this. So it's got a pin and then it's got a rounded part. The pin needs to go on the bottom, so that the seam of the connector sits inside of this rounded part of the crimper. Otherwise, if you do it the other way, what happens is you press the one side, you'll press one side of the seam down, and it won't crimp evenly. So anyway, this is just a little tip. All right, so I'm just gonna grab this thing and crimp it. And there, that's got it right there. So if you look now, you got a nice good crimp, and we didn't split that top part. So the power supply is labeled positive and negative. So this is volts, positive and negative. So you're going to put one positive on the plus side, and then the negative on the negative side. Okay, let's got our power supply almost done. And so now let's finish up this side. So I'm going to plug in the heated bed cables. If I can get them sorted out properly. Okay, it's got that. And then lastly, plug in the heated bed thermistor. Barely. Anyway, give yourself more than 5 inches of slack when you're doing this yourselves. There it goes. Definitely did not give myself enough slack. All right, there it is right there. I'm just plugging in the Z stepper motor and pulling the slack back in here. That way everything looks nice and tidy. All right, so I'm gonna plug in my little fan here and double check to make sure that all this stuff is working. All right, now back to the power supply. So now this is how we finish trimming up our little part here. So now I'm just gonna push this thing in here, and I'm gonna probably have to glue this, but I'm just gonna put it in there for now. It's a pretty tight fit. And so it's the red one goes here where it says L on the power supply. Next one is N for the neutral. And they had black here when I took it apart. And then finally the shield. So the shield has a little ground emblem on it. All right, so now I'm gonna plug it in and turn it on and see if my fan comes on. Make sure you leave room for the fan to sit inside this little space here. Now I'm just gonna turn it on to check. Yep. All right. And then lastly, just button it up. Not the right screws. And I really need to do a better job of organizing the cables inside the motherboard area because they look bad. All right, and then lastly is going to be the cover for our power supply. So we're going to use this part here. And let's see if we can get it in here. Yep. Good thing about this particular model that I made is that I left this completely open. So if you wanted to do the 120 millimeter fan upgrade, what you're removing is this aluminum cover here. So there's plenty of space left to do that mod. That'll probably be a future video. All right, and that's it. I still have to route these wires over here. You can see. Yeah, so These wires here still need to be routed, but you know, I'll do that later. So what I plan to do is just stick them inside this extrusion here. Actually, you probably do it now. And I may have to 3D print some covers that'll fit in there to hold them nice and neat. Let's install our display. And this machine is going to get a clipper. So this screen is not going to stay for much longer, but in the meantime we can actually use it before I get to putting clipper on it. All right, so let's check it out. All right, so now let's look at our wire management. There's our wire management now. No need for drag chains or any of that stuff. We got the hot end all the way to the top. So we run it down. We pick up all of our slack down here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And I think it looks much neater like this than with that power supply on that extrusion on top. All right, let's home it. All right, guys, that wraps up this video. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Turn on your notification bells and leave me some comments. I love reading the comments and do my best to answer your questions as soon as I see it. All right, guys, till next time, take care.